All right, so far on my shape composition, I've built 3 shapes. I've built these pants by doing a rectangle that then I distorted and warped to give me these curves. I did the shirt using a rectangle and then warping and distorting, but I couldn't get what's called the undercut of the arm. So then I created a third shape as a triangle that cut into the arm. Now, what would I do if I wanted to cut this shape out of that shape? What I would need to do is right-click on the layer and say rasterize the layer, which changes it into a normal layer, not a shape tool. Then I would select the empty space around it, select inverse to select the inside shape, and then, just like we did on our last cartoon assignment, I would go to the blue layer with that inside rectangle selected, and I could delete from it. But because it's a shape layer, it won't let me, because shapes and vectors are not directly editable. So in order to delete from it, I would have to right-click on that and say rasterize layer, and then it would allow me to. Now here's the only problem with doing that, and why that's not going to be the method we use for this project. As shape layers, so this is now the only vector shape I have left, and these two are now rasterized. You'll notice that Photoshop makes them match whatever resolution I give them if they're a vector. But what if I grow this and make this a lot bigger now? You're going to notice that my blue shape, which is rasterized now, which basically means it's just a bunch of pixels, versus my shape layer, which is a shape drawn by Photoshop and filled in as a vector. This is going to blur out. The blue will blur at the edge, but the brown will not. So I'm going to go to image size, just for this example, really increase its resolution, force it a lot bigger. All right, so we've made this image a lot bigger now, so let me zoom out. And it looks fine from here, but now when we zoom in, you can tell from the edges of the rasterized version how soft it got, whereas my vector tool scaled up as cleanly as possible within the resolution. So that's the advantage of vector tools. You can really see it at this size. Vector tools will always scale perfectly. So go back in my history before I made it so enormously large. Okay, so I don't want you to ever rasterize your shape layers. So if you want to cut out from a shape, you'll need to do it by painting in the negative space, as I did with that shirt. Or I could have built this shirt out of multiple shapes instead of just one shape. But I'm trying to do the most simple, basic shapes first. Okay, now I'm going to do the dog. What shape should I use? Well, the dog is not a simple shape, right? If I use the polygon tool, I can make it like a 7-sided polygon. Should have picked something I know the name of. It's not a septagon. And then I can change its properties, of course. Take off its outline, change its fill color, and then I can transform it and stretch it and rotate it. And then I can right click and I can warp it. And I'm just trying to get the attitude of the dog. While curving the back. So these shapes can get pretty interesting and complex. Pushing and pulling, you'll learn a lot about what you can do. And you can keep on transforming them, but you want to keep them always as a shape tool. Okay, but there's no way that I can pull the legs from that same shape. So instead I'm just going to make some more shapes. And maybe I'll use different tools, like the ellipse tool, which I haven't used yet, to make ovals. Transform them, rotate them, size them, warp them, distort them, mess with them, until they do what you need. And you see where they overlap, that's no problem. Because these, I don't have an outline turned on for any of these. So even though the computer will show me an outline when they're selected, when they're stacked on top of each other, that outline will disappear. So I can make complex shapes by building up multiple shapes. You'll see on vectors, the computer makes a little outline for you when you have a transform box around them, which is helpful, but that's not really there. I can stretch it further. Okay, now that I have that complex shape, it's like a bean shape, very helpful for Disney animation. I can, instead of drawing that shape again and starting from just a regular oval, for this shape, I can just do Command J, and that will duplicate the full vector shape. And then I can just rotate that, scale it, and you'll notice whatever the composition you use, there'll be a lot of repetition of shapes. Artists favor certain combinations. Now here's another option. If you're using the Move tool, you can choose the option of Auto Select Layer, which is very helpful because you're going to be building up lots of different shape layers. With Auto Select Layer, whatever shape you click on, it will automatically select that shape. So when you want to alter shapes, it's very useful. Hit return. Now I just use the Auto Select Move tool so I can seam those two shapes together. Okay, and then I can duplicate it again, move this new one over. Other transform options, I can flip it horizontally to make this tail. Then warp it a little bit, like rolling dough, stretch it out. In some cases, you might find more elegant shape solutions than the artist you're copying from. And this is an exercise, it's all about experimenting with it, seeing how the tools work, seeing how you can be expressive with them. Okay, duplicate that. Work on the legs. You can see that organic stuff is a little bit more difficult than mechanical stuff. And that's where the warp tool is very, very helpful. But this was all just started with an ellipse tool. And stretching it and just getting the very most out of it. Now there are limits to what warping can do, so you should also recognize when you need to create a new shape. And for the paw, there isn't a way I can build that new shape out of the existing one. Whoops. So I instead just add a new oval. Lots of shapes building up. Let me finish off that dog. Maybe a triangle. You have to put how many sides you want in. I don't know why it's defaulting to having an outline. It's annoying, but I can deal with it. And this will be for the ear. But then if I want to bend the ear, I'm just going to warp it by right-clicking inside and then using the warp transform options. All of these options are under Edit as well. It's just Command-T is a really nice shortcut that gets you there quickly. And then how do I match the color with the rest of the dog? Well, I just double-click and I can use the dropper to steal the color directly. All right. And there's no way to combine these shapes into one layer without rasterizing them. And we don't want to rasterize them because that makes them less versatile, not so scalable. All right. What I like is I can now just turn off the background and see what that shape looks like. Right? That shape's looking pretty good. That shape's looking pretty good. For arms, I can use the ellipse and then rotate and then warp. Okay, to get that arm. And then for the color, just double click on it and then steal the color if you want directly from. Okay, here's the problem though. Shapes stack up just like any other layer. So right now, I have the arm. Here, I'll turn this off so you can see. I have the arm underneath this triangle layer. So this will also help you understand how to stack layers and how all of that can work. And when it makes sense to stack a layer and when it doesn't. Because I want the shirt to overlap the arm, but I want that triangle not to interfere with the shape of the arm. So that means I need to adjust my triangle. So lots of fun things we'll be trying here. And you're going to wish you could just draw or paint. But those are the limitations of vector tools. It's not as direct as all of that. Okay, now I've got at least a little bit established for everything. I'll put in a neck. And I'll move that, let me stretch it a little bit, and I'll move that behind the shirt. Right. Or maybe to make a collar, I'll move it on top of the shirt, but I'll warp it a little bit. So right now, I just want you dealing with the shapes that are pretty easy to do, even though you can't see the image underneath once you start covering it up. And you can use the move tool to move around and make multiple selections. Once you get to the place where you've kind of built up some of the image, as I have, now you want to fill in those big background shapes. And so on top of my white layer here, that was only a 50% fill, now I'm going to do some big vector shapes, just big rectangles. One like this. Get rid of its outline, pick its color. Okay. And then a big background shape for the top. I can just duplicate it and move it. But this one I want to be this color. So by the end of today, what I would like to see, what would be ideal, or before we start at next class, is that you have shapes that fill up everything. And then what we'll do is we'll move our background layer, we'll duplicate it onto a new layer, so it's no longer a background, and we'll move it to the very top of all of our shapes, and we will make it a very low opacity.